Welcome back. Donald Trump unveiled a new line of personal and ugly attacks against Vice President Kamala Harris yesterday, calling her lazy. The former president made the comment during a roundtable event with Latino voters in Miami and falsely claimed his opponent has not been on the campaign trail.
I was going to hit her really hard on the trail today, but now I don't have to because she's off. She's off. No, I can't get over it. Who the hell takes off? We have 14 days left, and she'll take a couple of more days off, too. You know why? She's lazy as hell, and she's got that reputation.
Joining us now, co-host of The Weekend on MSNBC, Symone Sanders Townsend. Symone, always good to see you. We should note, first as a fact check, Vice President Harris did a series of interviews yesterday and back on the campaign trail today, and heard she's had an absolute relentless pace in recent weeks. So with that as the backdrop, what do you make of Trump's comments? Lazy there? Feels like a trope.
It does feel like a trope, Jonathan. And, you know, I do believe that in some respects, Donald Trump knows exactly what he's doing. He would love for the vice president and her campaign and even, you know, us in the media apparatus to spend time talking about his attacks against the vice president, calling her out of her name, mispronouncing her name, calling her lazy, which is in fact a trope. I think if we really look at the schedules of the two candidates here and the aggressive nature of the schedules, Donald Trump is the person that comes out looking like the lighter schedule, looking lazy, and his own aides told folks at Politico, I do believe, that he is exhausted. Okay, so that let's just put the facts on the table. But he would love for folks to talk about that and not about where he stands on the abortion amendment in Florida. He doesn't want folks to talk about his economic policies and how even the head of Bloomberg admonished his unbelievable stance as it relates to tariffs. He doesn't want us to talk about the issues because the issues are not great for him. This other battleground that the Republican apparatus likes to fight on, is which I call the culture wars. They are a distraction, but they are in fact their playbook.
So, Symone, let's talk about the map. 7 battleground states, just mentioned a short time ago, per some polling, Democratic polling, all of them within the margin of just 1-2 points or so. Right now, Democrats you speak to and speak to all the time, which states does the Harris team feel best about? Which ones are they worried about?
Well, I will note that the Harris folks, they all, I mean, you know as well because you're talking to them, they are very not overconfident at all, very demure, as the young folks might say, very mindful about seeming overconfident or seeming like they feel like anywhere they have it in the bag. They really feel like that they need to compete on every single ground and that they have their targets. And because of the infrastructure specifically that the campaign has built in state by state, in key districts, they believe they'll be able to close the gaps and be successful on Election Day. The Harris campaign also believes it's going to be close. I know a lot of folks out there, voters, especially Democrats, keep saying, oh, well, what if it's really a big gap and the polls aren't telling the truth? It just feels like there's so much energy. It feels like a lot of people are early voting, and they are, which is excellent, right? I think this is a residual from the pandemic. And so 18 million people that I last checked have early voted thus far in this election. However, all of those early votes are not Democrats, and there are still going to be even more people that vote on Election Day. So the campaign is taking the stance that they're going to win this. How you win a presidential, congressional district by congressional district, state by state, and checking that early voter data and overlaying it with their targets. And they think that they've got a winning strategy here.
So let's get your analysis here. The Harris team has spent a lot of time in recent days focused on Republicans, her event with Liz Cheney, just one example of that. Is that the right play? Is there risks, though, that they're focusing on those voters rather than just simply trying to turn out the base?
Look, I am someone that personally believes, Jonathan, you have to have a both-and strategy. You cannot do it either or. Republicans are going to be a key part of Vice President Harris's coalition if she is successful. Base Democratic voters, though, are also going to be a key part of her coalition. There are not enough Republican voters, moderate independents, if you will, pardon me, to win her this race. She cannot win without base voters. And so what we saw last week from the vice president, I think, was a deep dive into base voters. Right now, this week, we are seeing a reach out to these Nikki Haley voters and probably some more independent voters who have yet to make up their decision, which they do exist. One of my students at Georgetown, I'm a fellow this semester, and she and her mother went and knocked doors in rural Pennsylvania on Sunday, and she came back and she said, I've found people that are actually undecided in this election. So they're out there, and what she is doing this week can make a difference for them. I don't think that and let's not forget, Governor Walz is on the campaign trail, President Obama is on the campaign trail. There are lots of folks who are out there on the vice president and all the vice president's behalf, but I don't think there's any stand-in for the candidate herself. So I think that we do need to see another town hall-like atmosphere, like we saw with Liz Cheney the other day with some base Democratic voters. I know she's doing a town hall this evening on another network, so we'll see what that looks like, but she's not leaving anything on the field, and that's necessary if she wants to be successful. And look, I think that the vice president herself has done the work. Now the voters will see if they're feeling what she's putting down.
And we should note, of course, that town hall tonight scheduled in place of what would have been her second debate with Donald Trump, except Donald Trump backed out.